Hi, I'm Randy Patterson, and this is Psychology Salon, a channel looking at various issues from a psychological perspective. Consider clicking the subscribe button below. Recent tragic events have reminded me of something. In the late 1980s, I worked part-time on a spinal cord injury rehabilitation unit. The majority of patients were young males, which I'm told is common for these units. I worked with patients on adjustment to their injuries and the requirements of their altered lives. The head of our service had worked there for a number of years. I asked him to tell me the most common types of incident that would bring people into this unit. And he said something that stuck in my mind. Then I heard someone else at another facility say exactly the same thing. And I began listening for the list, and I heard it over and over and over again. I was working in Canada, and the list that I heard was motor vehicle accident, work-related injury, sporting accident, and in America, gunshot. And in America, gunshot. Those four words repeated virtually verbatim again and again. Now, I saw people in Canada injured in motor vehicle accidents. This was far and away the most common route of entry to our unit. I saw people who'd been injured on the job. I saw two who had athletic injuries, one hockey, one diving. But I never saw anyone who had received their injury by gunshot. An Ontario study of the epidemiology of spinal cord injury seems to bear out that Canadian impression. Of patients aged under 65, 43% received their injury in motor vehicle accidents, 24% from falls of various sorts, 12% from accidents involving other vehicles, bicycles, ATVs, so on, and 9% in sports-related incidents. Only 5% were injured as a result of violence of any kind. It was not mentioned how many of these were gunshot-related. A review of US data published in 2012 confirmed a much higher incidence of violence-related spinal cord injury in the States, though this appeared to be declining in the years from the 1990s, about 21%, to the early 2000s, about 12%. Given that military personnel who are at risk for violence-related spinal cord injury on the battlefield, given that they're usually seen in their own hospitals, the actual figure may be somewhat higher. And the reduction in the percentage over time may not translate into a reduction in actual numbers, given that the overall incidence of spinal cord injury is increasing. It sticks in the mind, that phrase, though, and in America, gunshot. Particularly when grown adults continue to stand up on their hind legs and argue that arming high school staff will prevent school shootings. Well, apparently not always. Columbine High School had an armed guard. So did Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. Sandy Hook did not, but it did have locked doors. The shooter shot his way in via a window. So we'd need bulletproof windows, not just better doors. Thank you, Ted Cruz. Robb Elementary in Uvalde had a school district security team, but that didn't seem to stop anything. And in fact, there was a small crowd of armed police just outside the classroom for an hour while the incident continued. And of course, most mass shootings don't happen within schools. We'd have to arm cinema staff, retail clerks, and all homeowners as well. But in heavily armed spots like military bases, apparently these events don't happen. Except, of course, they have and do. Fortunately or unfortunately, there have been enough of these school shootings to constitute a fair sample size for a study comparing what happens with and without armed school officials. Peterson, Densley, and Erickson, in a 2021 JAMA Network open publication, looked at the number of deaths and injuries in schools with and schools without. I'm going to quote from their study. The data suggest no association between having an armed officer and the deterrence of violence in these cases. Lots of money, no benefit. In fact, they go on. An armed officer on the scene was the number one factor associated with increased casualties after the perpetrator's use of assault rifles or submachine guns. So, not a randomized controlled trial, so there are some limitations to this study. But the evidence suggests pretty strongly that putting more guns in schools is not the answer, and it may only increase the problem, not decrease it. Odd that despite the fact that there are so many more armed guards and armed citizens in the US, it continues to suffer so many incidents like these. Now, we're not immune to them in other countries. Canada had an incident in Montreal in 1989. It had a multi-site incident in Nova Scotia in 2020, and there have been a few others. Even placid Norway and New Zealand have had really horrific examples, but the rate is lower in developed nations other than the United States. But what is this? Is it a moment of opportunity for real change after the most recent school shooting? Probably not. If Sandy Hook didn't do it, if Marjorie Stoneman didn't do it, if Robb Elementary didn't do it, if Las Vegas didn't do it, it's hard to see what would tilt the balance. Over half the respondents from one of America's political parties recently said in a survey that America might just have to get used to school shootings. Maybe the only thing to do is to say goodbye even a little bit more attentively when your child goes to school in the morning because, well, maybe they won't come home. The stance is common. It's not the guns. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. America, which has far more of these events than any other developed nation, well, it just has worse people. People that are more prone to violence. People that are less able to solve matters like grown-ups. People who care less about one another's welfare. The evidence suggests maybe that's not true. Maybe it was never true. Maybe Americans are not worse than other people. Maybe it is the guns after all. Thanks for watching. My books, including the Assertiveness Workbook, are available from all major booksellers, and my online courses can be found at psychologysalon.teachable.com. See you again.